Well, fuck it. Don't give a damn if anyone believes it or not. Normie here. Newbie lawyer, making about $1,500 month, plus bonus, started on /b/back on 2010. Saw it on Cracked. It took me a while to understand how this shithole works, go on /x/. I remembered I got spooked far more often back then, maybe I just got used to, become an avid lurker at /x/, /fit/ and /vr/. Sometimes even posting. One day I posted a funny somewhere, and some trip named Mandiopan kept responding to me, haha you funny guy, take the S, forget about it immediately. Later that night playing WoW, Cataclysm was just out. Questing with my undead warrior, some dude named Trivian PMs me, hey funny guy, it's Mandiopan, haha, take the S, I freaked the fuck out. Seriously, like, it started slowly, because I remembered that faggot line, then it dawned on me, where have I seen it on fucking 4chan? How the fuck this dude knew me? Try PM back. No player with this name is online. Try email, same thing, maybe some friend of mine knew I posted on 4chans, forgot about it. Buy my GF some book, Bisha love book, about a guy telling his story after he was in an accident that left him crippled. GF loves the book, said it was funny, I should read it. Third chapter, the guy is a hospital and some male nurse is giving him a shower, I shit you not. That's what the character says, chill out bro, or dandruff will turn into Mandiopan, ha ha ha. You funny dude, take the S, I feel weird, as if I were instantly drunk or high, feels like a dream, thoughts start mush and mix, tell the story to my sister, she does not believe, tell to my mom, she thinks is a joke. Same thing with GF, go to // ever since but every fucking on just answers Mandiopan. Haha, funny guy take the ass, it's fucking true and no one believes in you. Haha you funny guy, take the ass.
Homeless guy riding a bike, points his finger at my friend like an imaginary gun, says, bang, and fakes recoil on his gun hand. Friend grabs his chest and slumps over. Homeless bike guy, in thick Eastern European accent. Ha ha. I come from space. He rides away so. Random encounter thread. Doing patrol of building, dark business park, near front by roundabout when I hear maniac cackling. Homeless man riding bike in the dark cackling loudly. Sitting at security desk. Front lobby is mirrored glass. Loud bang. Against the top glass pane. Look outside and see a dead bird with its neck snapped fidgeting on ground. Employees rush outside to help. Girl is sobbing, it's dead.
Going home from friend's house late at night. He lives in a somewhat rural suburb. Have to walk along a long stretch of road without any lights. Dark as fuck. Can't see shit. Only light is from the occasional car that's passing me. Suddenly a bicycle stops next to me. Sitting on it, a guy wearing a leather trench coat, cowboy boots, jeans, fingerless gloves, and a completely black motorbike helmet, visor and all, with about 5 burning flashlights duct taped to it. Oh fuck, I'm going to get mugged and killed. He says in a deep and gravelly voice, hop on. I'm alone at night on an abandoned road, might as well join this creepy stranger on his bike, it's gonna be a wild ride. Kid starts pedaling like the fucking devil, breezing across the pavement, illuminating the night with his fucking flashlight helmet, drops me off close to home, salutes and disappears around a corner. I like to believe that I met the fairy of stray youths that night.
Going to use a name when I post Greentext, hope you're all okay with that. Sometime between 2002 to 2005, on habbo.co.uk there is a promotion going on with Nokia and Orange Mobile. Employees from both companies have access to an unlimited company account that allows them to buy Habbo credits at us for a cut rate, and then charge them back to the company. The idea behind it was so Nokia and Orange staff were able to buy furniture items for the promotional events that we were doing in-game with them. An employee from one of the two companies was withdrawing large amounts of credits, as much as 10,000 C at a time, from the company account, which tallies up at quite a lot of money. I believe at the time, the rate we charged them out at was £50 for 500 C to normal users, but Orange and Nokia employees got a cut rate of about £7 for 500 C. One of the Habbo's voluntary moderators offers to investigate this guy and find out exactly what he was up to. She gets back to us about it, and it turns out to be something quite horrifying. Turns out, he was abusing his position in order to pay kids, and I mean kids 11 to 13-year-olds, for webcam sex and lewd pictures via MSN, and we had plenty of evidence to back it up. She managed to create another account, pose as a 12-year-old, and convince this guy to reveal himself for what he was, a fucking nonce. We built up a huge case against him, But when we went to the higher-ups about it, they weren't interested. We approached them about it, and we were all sent an email that looked something like this: "We are aware of the user in question, but thank you for the attempt to bring him to our attention. However, we will not be taking action against him as no real harm is being done. Both parties are getting what they want, and we are making a significant profit from it in the process. There is nothing more to be discussed in regards to this, and any members of the Hobbit team caught discussing this amongst themselves are to be put through disciplinary, and upon a repeat offense suspended from the program indefinitely." Several people quit the Hobbit program on the spot, and I threatened my manager by telling them I'd both resign and report the happenings to the police during a group meeting we had on MSN. At the time I was working paid on customer support and community care, so I was obliged to protect the community at all costs, as it was a part of my contract, so I wasn't really able to stand for this even if I wanted to. He panics and begs me to do nothing of the sort, even tries bribing me by offering me a significant amount of overtime. I told him regardless of what he wants me to do, I'm emailing the guy's manager and making them aware of what he is doing. I do it, they fire him, and thank me for not making a noise about it. The members of the moderation and Hobbit team that knew about it were sworn to silence by my higher-ups, and none of us ever spoke about it until we dropped our association with the company, or resigned from our positions. One Hobbit who spoke out about it first was Red Velvet, who was probably the most foul-mouthed person we had representing the company, referred to my manager as a kitty fiddler enabling fuck when I asked her about it years ago. I really have no idea what the fuck he was thinking, nor do I have any idea what the fuck the rest of the managers were thinking when they followed through with his brain-dead idea of attempting to cover up a scandal amongst a community of gobshites. Interview with Red Velvet on the subject: "Apologize, I got the phone company wrong while telling the story originally." Red Velvet: "You hit dead on the snowball that made us quit. I was assigned to go undercover and investigate a man who was giving out thousands of credits worth of furniture every day in exchange for cyber with young girls. Once I got to know him, I found out he was an employee of Vodafone and was sending fake SMSA through their system to get free credits all day long. When I gave the head Hobbit the logs of this investigation, she told me to keep it quiet and let him do what he wanted, since Vodafone was sending them the money that he was using and nobody was getting hurt. That broke my heart, my spint, and my faith in the Habbo staff. I was bound by the Habbo contract not to speak of this for 6 months beyond the date I quit. Once that time limit was up, I was interviewed by Watchdog, which I'm told is a TV show in the UK, and told them everything. I have no idea if that ever made it on the air, as I live in the US. Other than chasing money over people, I saw no problems with the staff. We are aware of the user in question, but thank you for the attempt to bring him to our attention. However, we will not be taking action against him as no real harm is being done. Both parties are getting what they want, and we are making a significant profit from it in the process. There is nothing more to be discussed in regards to this, and any members of the Hobbit team caught discussing this amongst themselves are to be put through disciplinary, and upon a repeat offense suspended from the program indefinitely."
September 2010. Bree Atkins, aka Mary, dies in a car accident. Her Habbo account is password changed to a randomly generated password by the staff team to prevent anyone from jacking the account to make a cunt of themselves. Fast forward to around February 2011, and I get an email from my work colleague frantically telling me to get my ass in client to have a look at something he found in the trading room of a pretty famous user. Login, load up client, go to his Chamber of Secrets room, which is where he keeps all of the dodgy items he confiscates from people before feeding them into the in-game recycler, in order to get rid of them in his downtime. Sat in the middle of his room are 3 trophies with blank inscriptions on them. 1 gold, 1 bronze, and 1 silver, all from the user, Mary, and all of which were sent in January 2011. A noticeable amount of time after her death. I was pretty sure it was some sort of distasteful prank, and trust me, Habbo's community did distasteful very well in later years. And I go to check the last logged in IP address on her account. Her frequently logged in IP address is the only one that appears on the account, and nobody had logged into the account since her death, which means the trophies couldn't have been directly sent from her account. Nope. Pull my colleague about it, and ask him where the fuck they came from. Explore all possibilities as to how these trophies could have came into circulation. Nothing turns up. Drop investigating it and he later recycles the trophies in order to delete them. Several other trophies from Mary showed up in-game in her friends' inventories, but we usually managed to grab them before anyone got chance to see them. The incident was officially noted as an unknown bug, and nothing more was done about it. As far as I know, the entire moderation team were aware of these trophies existing. And one regular user, who used to be a moderator, was aware of it as well. Worth noting. Neither me, nor him had access to Mary. Nor did we want access to it. The only people who had any chancel at getting access to that account were her parents, upon requesting the login from us, and they never got in touch with us to do so. As a side note, at a later date, probably mid-2012, her Habbo user page changed, and someone spelt out "angel" in letters above her username, which can still be seen, even though it is broken, here, but I never followed it up. No idea who changed it, or for what reason, but it happened. ex.habbo.com/home/Mary. I apologize for slow posts, but I'm doing this from my phone. This is nowhere near as short as I thought it would be. 2011. Meet a guy called Giovanni from the Dutch version of Habbo. He owns a website dedicated to more or less breaking, disrupting gameplay with software he and his friends write. I'll show you how clever you are, when I nip your shit in the bud. Join his forum, and start posting under the guise of being a normal user. Eventually gain his trust, end up as head moderator on said forum. Feed everything he creates back to my superiors, because it's my job. Game gets patched, all is well. Eventually Giovanni opens up to me about his personal life, as people often do on these games, tells me he wants to off himself and all of that. Become a genuine close friend of his, and report back to my boss with what he has told me in regards to his personal life. Tells me to pass it on to the moderation team, who will forward it on to a suicide hotline charity. Eventually leave my job, lose contact with him, but never left any doors closed. Gave him my email, and never told him I ever worked for the company, even though he did have suspicions. Fast forward to 8 months ago. I receive an email from Giovanni telling me he's had enough, and he's going to kill himself. This is pretty standard to me at this stage. Forward it to his friend, saying, "I'm going to respond to this when I get in from work tonight. Talk to him until then. Thanks." By the time I read the email he was already dead. Turns out he'd killed himself earlier that day, and I missed him by about 3 hours. Noped out big time when I found out about it. If you want to hear about some of the weirder shit that I've come across, let me know. The earlier days were the weirdest ones for the hacking, scripting, period. But the later ones were the weirdest for the stalkers, and genuine psychopaths who wanted to fuck me, and or kill me.
Time for one of my nopiest of nopes I have ever noped, 2004, which puts me at 19 years old at the time. At this point, I was a community moderator, but I had a lot of free reign to do as I liked, so I could chat to users, and such, meet a slightly younger girl called Julia, 18, on the newly opened Dutch version of Habbo, where I was supervising the launch, and preventing the English users from making cunts of themselves with the new Dutch community. Seems pretty nice, but she has shitty English. Asks me to talk to her more often so she can pick up the language. Sure, what could possibly go wrong? Add her over on the UK version, which is where I am based out of, and we get talking pretty often, and become quite good friends. If anything, she grows increasingly infatuated with me, but I let it slide under the radar, because I'm used to it. Let's do the time warp again. 2006, which puts me at 21. Eventually I become friends with a guy she knows called Adam, who warns me she's batshit insane, and that I'm an idiot for trusting her. His words were, "Just wait until she shows up on your doorstep." Dude, tell him yeah, right, like that's gonna happen. I was wrong. One day, Julia stops coming on MSN, and eventually drops off of Habbo for a week. Out of nowhere, I get a phone call in Dutch and broken English from a girl. Ik hou van jou. Yes, I am here to see you. Anon, line goes dead. Fucking no way. Go into full denial mode. Must be a prank call. Wrong again, Buster. Knock on my door later that day. Guess who it is? Julia. Throws herself over my doorstep and force hugs me. Don't really know how to react to this because I didn't give her my address, and I'm terrified. What the fuck is happening? Cunt.
Invite her in regardless, because I'm not a total dick, and ask her what she is doing here, and how she found me. I try to keep as cool as possible, but I'm visibly shitting my pants. She just smiles at me, and tries to explain. Turns out, she got my address from a leak that happened on the customer support line 5 months prior, in which my address, works email, phone number, full name, the lot, was included in with that of about 50 to 70 other people who worked for Select/Habbo. She sums it all up with, "And now I am here to be with you forever and ever. I got a ferry here to be with you." What? Don't really know how mentally stable this chick is, don't want to get my face peeled off, ultimately end up spending the day with her, in which she acts like nothing is wrong, and likes clinging onto me, and calling me her boyfriend, play along with it both out of fear for my life, and partially for her sake as she is clearly a fucking total nutjob. She goes home after 2 days of this, and 3 months later ends up in the loony bin when she starts hearing voices and seeing things. Apparently, there was a chunk of self-harm, and supposedly went for someone with a knife for saying they don't want anything to do with her anymore, fucking shit the largest bricks known to mankind, and proceed to become terrified every time someone knocks on my door, knowing I quite easily could have been killed in the 2 days I spent with her, end up having to move house, still makes me paranoid thinking about it to this day, and I occasionally have nightmares over it. Thank God I am no longer at that address. We'll post a few more if anyone is interested. Just let me know what it is you want to hear about. Might have to be tomorrow though, as I have work in the morning.
2007, 22 years old. Main bases of operations at this point in time are Habbo UK and Habbo USA. Going about my business in client, hosting an event on the US hotel, standing in for the site manager who is on vacation at that point in time. One of the on-duty moderators calls me over from my desk, was working out of the London offices on this particular day, with a worried look on his face. Anon, what should I do about this? Guy pulls up the chat logs from a room he was monitoring in spectator view. Looks like, high-ranking staff member who I shall call Colin, has been talking to a random girl in a room. Weird, he's not even supposed to be on shift, he's not at the office today, what's he doing online? Don't know, but read his chat log, read through it, and it consists of him calling some girl none of us have ever heard of, everything from the love of his life, to a dirty little slut, all the while threatening to out her for what she's been up to her parents unless she stayed with him. For fuck's sakes, Colin, what the fuck are you doing, you stupid cunt? Do checks on this girl's account, and her age checks out at 15 years old, and Colin, at the time, was about 30. How fucking long has this been going on? Tell the moderator who stumbled upon this to go and relax for a bit, while I get to the bottom of this. Start digging through Colin's chat logs, and gather that he's been seeing this girl for about 6 months, and that they've had chem chats outside of Habbo, over MSN. Also notice that he's been gifting her loads of expensive, and unreleased, items in-game. Decide to force my way into Colin's work email to find out more information, as he used his work's email as the recovery for his personal. Lock him out of his MSN and personal inbox, and trawl through his emails. A bingo. I shit you not, literally thousands of back and forth emails between him and this girl from Habbo, who was called Destiny. They started off casual and friendly, became quite romantic and filthy, then the nudes came in, and then videos, then arguments, and then finally it ended with about 50 back and forths of him threatening her with nude pictures of herself, and a list of her information, including her bank details, address, phone number, etc., while she begs him not to, and sends him more nudes at his request, in order to keep him from outing her. Feel fucking sick to my stomach.
Release his email back to him after I take backups of everything, and he doesn't know I've been into it. He plays it off as must have just bugged itself up, I'm back in now. Resist the urge to break his nose when he comes back into work the next morning. Keep an eye on him in client for a further 2 weeks after informing a company director about what is going on. Suddenly, Colin puts holidays in at work, and before he clocks off and leaves the office, he sends Destiny a message in Habbo saying see you there, remember to bring it with you, I'll be about 2 hours. She does not get chance to respond. Luckily, I was on duty, and I leapt on it the second he sent it. Oh no, you fucking don't. Literally jump out of my chair, and run out of the office after him, and put my hand on his shoulder. Call, before you go. Director, wants to talk to you. I have somewhere to be, can't I do this later? No, you can't, it'll only take 5 minutes. Fine. Police are called in. I hand in all of the evidence I've gathered against him, and the whole thing was very quietly dealt with between me, the mod who discovered what he was up to, a company director, and the police, in the privacy of said director's office. Colin got fired on the spot, his account got debauched, and banned, his work email was seized, his phone was seized, his personal email was seized, his computer was seized, the police took everything, girl's parents were informed, and I believe they got their daughter to press charges against him for harassment, stalking, amongst a whole pile of other things. Email is sent out to myself, and everyone else who was in the office the day Colin was let out, telling us all it was totally unrelated to anything regarding Habbo or Silicon Corporation, and nobody believed it. As a side note, one of the female moderators I worked with spat at him as he was let out of the office by the police. and the only thing said to her was enough, by one of the officers who came to pick him up. She just shook her head, and went back to work after muttering something to herself. We never saw him again after that, and word has it, he did some time for his sins. I'm just glad I managed to put a stop to it before he fucking hurt someone.
Used to roleplay on Habbo, met some creepy people there. This one guy used to be obsessed with one of the girls in our roleplay group, and I mean, obsessed. I can't remember her name myself, but I think it was something like Caitlin. The only things he ever asked was, "Where's Caitlin? When's Caitlin getting on? Caitlin, Caitlin, Caitlin." Eventually, we'd all made a room on MSN, and this nigga continued with the fuckery. We removed him from the chat and didn't mess about with him. I hung around this group for 6 months longer, and he still attempted to get in contact with us. More specifically, Caitlin. I went inactive, came back a year and a half later, and I scrolled through my old friends list. A lot of our group was also inactive, but 3 people including Caitlin were still active. They'd last logged on yesterday. Oh cool, I thought, and I eventually met them. We messed about, spoke for a while. Turns out this nigga was still trying to talk to Caitlin. Almost 2 years of him stalking a girl on Habbo. That's all I got. Short one just to fill in while I'm at work. 2005. Jeff Weiss goes on a shooting spree at Red Lake Senior High School. Media goes nuts and discovers he was an active user on Newgrounds and a few other popular websites at the time. Everyone suddenly starts painting the finger at the internet, mainly Newgrounds, claiming people online egged him on to do it. Police start poking around looking for more of his social media accounts and the like. 2 days after the shooting, my manager pulls me aside and asks for a quiet word with me in private. He's a total bro, so I don't mind. Anon, do you mind doing me a favor and wiping user from the database on .com? I don't have enough access to the housekeeping to do that. You do now. Consider it an unofficial promotion. Get it done for me. Sure, and thanks, but can I ask why? Isn't deleting someone a bit excessive? Know how the media have been asking around about that Red Lake shooter? Yeah, just gives me a look. Fuck off. No way. Let's keep damage to a minimum, yes? Sure man, I'll get it done. Fucking hell. Wipe it, and we never get any hassle about it. Later that year, I end up getting promoted genuinely by the same manager. Apparently the only people who were aware of his presence on Habbo were his friends, who didn't know who he was. Myself, another member of community staff, who I think discovered his aunt in the festo.
Log into Habbo for the first time in years. Go to the My Rooms tab to check out my old room. Notice there's a green indicator, meaning someone is currently in my room. What the fuck apparatus? I toot Hippo 79 Hainel Superbi Bimol Nesbo. Popetis Polizella Heratisit. This I deleted all my friends on Habbo years before when I quit, so it wasn't possible that anyone knew I was online. Quickly go in my room. There's a bald pale person dressed in all white sitting on my sofa. I stare at them in complete silence. Finally ask, who are you? No response. Try again. Hello? Why are you here? They reply, a fucking smiley. That's it. They instantly disappear from room. What are the odds that a person randomly stumbles upon my old ass room that had been visited by anyone in years right at the same time I decide to log in? It unsettled me. I'm sure there's an explanation, but again, the timing was just really creepy and almost beyond the realm of coincidence. Reiki and Tun Natalie Nyan Palaranchal. 2000, Habbo.fi, the pre-staff years at the time. Habbo was called Hoteli Culticala, or Goldfish for the English speakers among us. Syracuse Rita Poini Habita. The community was small and tightly knit together, everyone knew everyone, and things were pretty simple. Huda or Pak, December rolls around, and the staff are doing a Christmas event, and a giveaway to celebrate the upcoming launch of Habbo.co.uk in January the next year. Site suddenly goes offline, which wasn't uncommon at the time, as the whole thing was technically still in beta. Hotel immediately reloads, and everyone's rooms are missing, including the public bars, and everything else. Alert appears on the hotel view in Finnish that translated to someone threatening to wipe out the entire database out, and stop the launch of the UK hotel unless Oppo and Sampo, founders of Salake and Habbo, pay up $10,000. Another alert quickly follows in English reading, don't panic. We got this. Hotel goes down and instantly goes back online again. All of the rooms are restored, and the hotel gets immediately alerted with another Finnish message, this time saying velo poi, which translates to lights out. Hotel drops offline again, and this time stays down for 3 hours, with a message standing in its place, both in English and Finnish, not to worry, we'll fix this. When the hotel eventually comes back online, all of the rooms are restored, but every single one of them is called suck. Another alert in Finnish, this time it roughly translates to pay up. Are you scared? Down it goes again. All of the rooms are restored back to normal next time the hotel comes back online, and the hotel alerts stop. Nobody ever explained publicly what was going on, and I still don't know to this day. Asked about it when I eventually got a job at Lake, and nobody there could share any light on it. Asked Sampo about it, and he just shrugged it off as just another attack that happened in the earlier days. One of the devs probably fixed it.
A long detour the hitchhiker Andy picked up on that July afternoon was one of the stranger people he had met. She had, after a warm thanks for stopping, and a moment or two of silence, proclaimed herself to be able to grant a wish. The conjuration she had performed in support of this was quite remarkable. Once the sound of the symbol had stopped ringing in Andy's head, he was quite impressed. Now Andy, good Christian that he was always of the opinion that you should do a good deed for its own sake, and not for material reward. He lightly waved away the images of wealth or power that the girl suggested. My one wish, young lady, is to get you to where you're headed. The girl's face contorted with fear as darkness fell outside. The third floor. My friend Mark and I love exploring abandonments. We've been doing it for years, and I'm telling you, it never gets old. The constant creepy feeling, finding new areas, guessing at the history, it's almost addicting. From the first time we did it, we were hooked. Still, you can only explore houses for so long before you have to move on to something bigger, and that's what led us to what happened last year. There was this huge abandoned hospital near us, just a few towns over. We'd never seen it ourselves, but knew that it had been abandoned for several decades, having closed down in favor of a smaller, more modern one. Mark shot me down the first few times, suggested it, since he was worried about getting caught by the police. Eventually I was able to convince him though, pointing out that they'd probably just tell us to leave. It was around 7:30 p.m. when we left, but it was summer, so the sun was still up. On the way there, we went over the plan one more time. The hospital was pretty isolated, and the area around it was overgrown. The idea was to drive to a parking lot about a quarter mile away. From there, we'd sneak through the bushes, and by the time we got there, it would be dark enough to walk across that last paved stretch to the front doors unseen. When we got to the parking lot, we stood by the car for a few minutes. The road next to the lot went by the hospital, and we wanted to get an idea for the traffic, and, therefore, our chances of being seen. It seemed like our odds were pretty good. In the 10 minutes we waited, only a single car went by. Next, we checked our supplies. For each of us, a flashlight, a bottle of water, some disinfectant, a box of band-aids, and a cheap radio, for when we inevitably decided it would be creepier if we split up. I almost forgot, I got this from the library earlier. He reached into his backpack and retrieved a rolled-up piece of paper. It's a map of the building, for the fire exits and stuff. You take it? I asked, doesn't a map kind of defeat the purpose of exploring? We'll only look at it if we have to. If one of us gets hurt, it would kind of suck to bleed to death looking for the exit. Alright, but why do I have to take it? Because one of us means me. He had a point. In the years we'd been exploring, we'd had 3 total injuries. All of them were him. I put the map in my back pocket, and we started towards the hospital. Just as planned, it was dark when we got there. Because of the surrounding trees, we couldn't make out a clear silhouette of the building against the sky. Shining our flashlights on it showed a brick exterior, and 3 floors. Most of the windows were broken. The main entrance was wide open. One of the double doors was on the ground nearby, with the other nowhere to be found. Most definitely, we were not the first people to check it out, which was expected. I don't think we've ever had to break in ourselves. In we went. The place was in really bad shape. The floor was covered in dirt, and most of the doors had been kicked in. There were holes in most of the walls, indicating that thieves had taken the copper wiring. There was also loads of water damage. With all of this, do I even have to mention the graffiti? The first floor was probably the most interesting. It had the cafeteria, staff room, and, by far most interestingly, the morgue. There was even a set of tools left behind. As a rule, we don't take things from abandonments, but at that time we really wanted to. We went up the stairs to the second floor. There, most of doors were intact, and there was no graffiti. I guess the teenagers looking for trouble were too lazy to climb a set of stairs. The thieves had motivation though, and there were just as many holes in the wall as downstairs. It was at this time that, as always, Mark wanted to split up. I tend to take my time, and he moves pretty quickly in comparison. I go for details, he aims to see everything. Because of this, I knew he'd end up far away from me. It was alright with me though, as I kind of liked the silence. The creepiness is a big part of what makes it fun, and if he didn't split us up, I probably would have. The second floor was mostly just patient rooms. Beds and tables, nothing much. As I was exploring, I could hear Mark's footsteps upstairs. They'd go a distance, stop, I'd hear the faint sound of a door opening, and then I'd hear him move away. He really had gotten ahead. I'd only explored about half of the floor, because I then came across a relatively large sitting room, which was in the middle of the building. It was actually pretty well illuminated by moonlight, thanks to the large window that made up one wall. Looking out, I could see the paved front area we had entered from. I didn't really need the flashlight, so I turned it off. There was a coffee table in the center of the room, surrounded by 4 old sofas. Sat down at one of them for a water break. It was pretty creepy, just sitting there alone, everything bathed in a dull blue light. I kept seeing things out of the corner of my eye, but in that light, this was expected. I was just putting my bottle away when I heard my radio crackle. Mark said, "Hey, I'm kind of lost here. Can you help me find you?" I would have been annoyed at having to use the map, but after seeing things for a few minutes, I was kind of creeped out, and wanted to get back together. "Alright." I asked, "What's the nearest room number?" "I'm in room 308. "Okay. You're in the east wing, 3rd floor. Where do I go from here?" "Walk so that the numbers are descending. There should be a staircase next to 301. About 2 minutes went by. I was about to try talking to him again when he came back on. "Okay, these stairs are blocked." "Where are you?" I answered, "I'm in a sitting area in the middle of the 2nd floor. I take it you're next to 301 now?" "Yes." "Okay, now you'll want to move in ascending order then. There should be an employee staircase next to 349. That leads down here." Across the hall from the sitting room, according to the map, was a staff lounge. This was where the stairs went. After 10 more minutes, I could hear Mark's footsteps above me. Once again, the radio crackled on. "These stairs right here?" "Yep, I can hear you above me." As I listened to him walk off, I went to the door of the staff lounge. On the other side, I could hear Mark descending the steps and walking across the room. When he reached the door, the knob jiggled, but it was locked. I yelled through the door to unlock it. Strangely, he answered through the radio, even though he was just on the other side. "The lock is broken. You'll have to open it for me." I really don't like damaging sights, but I was way too freaked to keep sitting there by myself while I lead him to another staircase. I backed up and got ready to kick the door down. Just as I was about to kick it, my cell phone rang. I practically jumped through the ceiling. I answered the phone. "What? Christ, you scared the crap out of me." "And you've been scaring the crap out of me." It was Mark. Asked, "What do you mean I've been scaring you? You weren't answering your radio." "I've been waiting outside for like 20 minutes, where are you?" I went back to the sitting room and looked out the window. Sure enough, there he was on the pavement. I said, "Okay, I'm on the 2nd floor, the big window in the middle." I saw him look around for a second. He said, Yeah, I see you." It was then that I heard a loud series of bangs. I ran into the hall. The staff room door was shaking with each hit. Whoever was on the other side was wailing on it, trying to get out. I turned around and tore out of there. I met up with Mark outside, and without a word, we ran through the woods to the parking lot. We got in the car, and sped off towards his house. When we got there, I told him what had happened. Then, he gave me his experience. When I went ahead of you to the other end of the 2nd floor, tried to go upstairs. It was blocked by debris, but I heard footsteps up there. I kept trying to get you on the radio to ask how you did it, but you weren't answering. I thought you were screwing with me, but I was creeped out. I waited for you outside, and eventually thought to try your phone. I was thoroughly freaked, but he still had one last detail for me. "There's one more thing," he said. "Remember when I called you, and you asked if I could see you? I did see you. But..." He paused. I didn't want to say anything then, but I could swear I could see people in the 3rd floor windows. Autopilot. Have you ever forgotten your phone? When did you realize you'd forgotten it? I'm guessing you didn't just smack your forehead and say damn for no reason. The realization probably didn't dawn on you spontaneously. More likely, you reached for your phone, pawing open your pocket or handbag, and were momentarily confused by it not being there. Then you did a mental restep of the morning's events. Shit. In my case, My phone's alarm woke me up as normal, but I realized the battery was lower than I expected. It was a new phone and it had this annoying habit of leaving applications running that drained the battery overnight. So, I put it on to charge while I showered instead of into my bag like normal. It was a momentary slip from the routine, but that was all it took. Once in the shower, my brain got back into the routine it follows every morning, and that was it. Forgotten. This wasn't just me being clumsy. As I later researched, this is a recognized brain function. Your brain doesn't just work on one level, it works on many. Like, when you're walking somewhere, you think about your destination and avoiding hazards, but you don't need to think about keeping your legs moving properly. I wasn't thinking about regulating my breathing, I was thinking whether or not I should grab a coffee on the drive to work. I did. I wasn't thinking about moving my breakfast through my intestines, I was wondering whether I'd finish on time to pick up my daughter Emily from daycare after work or get stuck with another late fee. This is the thing, there's a level of your brain that just deals with routine, so that the rest of the brain can think about other things. Think about it. Think about your last commute. What do you actually remember? Little, if anything, probably. Most common journeys blur into one, and recalling anyone in particular is scientifically proven to be difficult. Do something often enough and it becomes routine. Keep doing it and it stops being processed by the thinking bit of the brain and gets relegated to a part of the brain dedicated to dealing with routine. Your brain keeps doing it, without you thinking about it. Soon, you think about your route to work as much as you do keeping your legs moving when you walk. As in, not at all. Most people call it autopilot. But there's danger there. If you have a break in your routine, your ability to remember and account for the break is only as good as your ability to stop your brain going into routine mode. My ability to remember my phone being on the counter is only as reliable as my ability to stop my brain entering morning routine mode, which would dictate that my phone is actually in my bag. But I didn't stop my brain entering routine mode. I got in the shower as normal. Routine started. Exception forgotten. Autopilot engaged. My brain was back in the routine. I showered, I shaved, the radio forecast amazing weather, I gave Emily her breakfast and loaded her into the car. She was so adorable that morning. She complained about the bad sun in the morning blinding her, saying it stopped her having a little sleep on the way to daycare, and left. That was the routine. It didn't matter that my phone was on the counter, charging silently. My brain was in the routine, and in the routine my phone was in my bag. This is why I forgot my phone. Not clumsiness. Not negligence. Nothing more, my brain entering routine mode and overriding the exception. Autopilot engaged. I left for work. It's a swelteringly hot day already. The bad sun had been burning since before my traitorously absent phone woke me. The steering wheel was burning hot to the touch when I sat down. I think I heard Emily shift over behind my driver's seat to get out of the glare. But I got to work. Submitted the report. Attended the morning meeting. It's not until I took a quick coffee break and reached for my phone that the illusion shattered. I did a mental restep. I remembered the dying battery. I remembered putting it on to charge. I remembered leaving it there. My phone was on the counter. Autopilot disengaged. Again, therein lies the danger. Until you have that moment, the moment you reach for your phone and shatter the illusion, that part of the brain is still in routine mode. It has no reason to question the facts of the routine, that's why it's a routine. It's not as if anyone could say, "Why didn't you remember your phone? Didn't it occur to you? How could you forget? You must be negligent." This is to miss the point. My brain was telling me the routine was completed as normal, despite the fact that it wasn't. It wasn't that I forgot my phone. According to my brain, according to the routine, my phone was in my bag. Why would I think to question it? Why would I check? Why would I suddenly remember, out of nowhere, that my phone was on the counter? My brain was wired into the routine, and the routine was that my phone was in my bag. The day continued to bake. The morning haze gave way to the relentless fever heat of the afternoon. Tarmac bubbled. The direct beams of heat threatened to crack the pavement. People swapped coffees for iced smoothies. Jackets discarded, sleeves rolled up, ties loosened, brows mopped. The park slowly filled with sunbathers and barbecues. Window frames threatened to warp. The thermometer continued to swell. Thank fuck the offices were air-conditioned. But, as ever, the furnace of the day gave way to a cooler evening. Another day, another dollar. Still cursing myself for forgetting my phone, I drove home. The day's heat had baked the inside of the car, releasing a horrible smell from somewhere. When I arrived on the driveway, the stones crunching comfortingly under my tires, my wife greeted me at the door. "Where's Emily?" Fuck. As if the phone wasn't bad enough. After everything, I'd left Emily at fucking daycare after all. I immediately sped back to the daycare center. I got to the door and started practicing my excuses, wondering vainly if I could charm my way out of a late fee. I saw a piece of paper stuck to the door. Due to vandalism overnight, please use side door. Today only. Overnight? What? The door was fine this morning. I froze. My knees shook. Vandals. A change in the routine. My phone was on the counter. I hadn't been here this morning. My phone was on the counter. I'd driven past because I was drinking my coffee. I'd not dropped off Emily. My phone was on the counter. She'd moved her seat. I hadn't seen her in the mirror. My phone was on the counter. She'd fallen asleep out of the bad sun. She didn't speak when I drove past her nursery. My phone was on the counter. She'd changed the routine. My phone was on the counter. She'd changed the routine and I'd forgotten to drop her off. My phone was on the counter. 9 hours. That car. That baking sun. No air. No water. No power. No help. That heat. A steering wheel too hot to touch. That smell. I opened the car door. Autopilot disengaged.
Hallucigenia. In 1977, English paleontologist Simon Conway Morris uncovered the fossilized remains of a life form, a previously unknown species from a previously unknown genus in an obscure rock formation in British Canada. Colleague Stephen Jay Gould, one of the most influential scientists of his lifetime, called this life form, unrelated to any living species, on the planet Earth. This photograph of the fossil the most accurate depiction available. As can be readily seen, his immediate resonance was not unfounded. It was so strange that they named this new species, Hallucigenia. The implication is that the scientists believed what they had found there, and would later find in China years later, was more likely a figment of their imagination than related to any life on Earth. The life form was asymmetrical. It moved via locomotion, employing tentacle-like lower appendages. Spines sat atop the creech in rows numbering the same as the tentacles. Gould and Morris retracted previous, more alarming statements about the nature of this entity. It must, of course, be some form of unknown arthropod. The only other logical explanation would be out of this world.
Asked friend if he knows anyone who had access to some tools I needed to finish a project, says sure, he knows a guy from work that would be happy to help. Apparently he was interested in the same kind of art. But warns me he's a bit off. Drive friend to work one day, he introduces me. Guy seems really distant and withdrawn, shakes my hand and we chat a bit. He seems real interested in the woodwork I was doing, and we talked about sculptures and such for a little while, things we'd leaned, tools we used, etc. Guy warms up a bit, and I ask him if it would be alright if I checked out some of his stuff. He hesitantly agrees, kind of like when you're trying to come up with an excuse, but just can't. He tells me to swing by that night, we can chat over a few beers. Okay, sure. Later that night I get a call. It's the guy. He sounds a little shaken up, says things chaotic at home, and right now isn't a good time. Says he'll call me sometime, whatever. Sure man. 2 weeks go by, guy calls one afternoon, says things have settled down, and he wants me to bring over some of my works as well, to compare and blah blah blah. Sure dude, so I start to head over, and notice this guy lives in the middle of fucking nowhere. I had to call him up just to find his house. It's at the end of a long driveway, beautiful acre plus of land. The driveway is littered with trees, and his house is actually pretty nice. As I come up the driveway, something strikes me odd about the trees I'm passing up. They all have faces carved into them facing the driveway, twisted, pained faces. I didn't think much of it, I make morbid stuff myself. And in fact I was very impressed, the amount of detail was staggering. Looking out onto the tree line of the property, every tree had pained face looking in on the house, almost like the woods were watching you wherever you were. This actually kind of creeped me out. Looking out was like seeing 100 or so white faces, just crying out. Go on.
Kind of like they wanted your attention. A knock on the door, guy answers with a beer in hand, and a much friendlier demeanor than before, helps me carry some of my stuff in, and he shows me around. Guy seems pretty cool. Begin to notice each room has one of those same damned faces hanging above the door frame. The more I saw them, the more I felt sick. Up close the faces were more detailed than I had imagined, almost surrealistic. I asked him what his focus on the faces were for, and the guy kind of tensed up and dodged my question. Upon entering his workshop, which was fucking sweet by the way, he seemed to have other interests besides creepy faces, entire 7-feet sculptures of women, men, animals, etc. all very well done, and one with a tarp in the back, just chilling there, He says it isn't done yet, so I don't bother. It was right in front of a door that I think led to another room. We begin working on stuff together, trading stories and times we had accidentally injured ourselves. Suddenly subjects change. Guy asks me what I think about God. Tell him I'm not very religious, but I don't rule anything out. Guy starts getting a bit loud, saying that God is a blatant lie. He was told so, by who? He kinda silenced for a moment, and then abruptly asked me if I believed in spirits. Gave him kind of the same answer, it's possible. He starts looked around the room, as if seeing if anyone is around, and then his voice goes soft, and he kind of whispers for a moment, I see things in the woods. At dusk I can see their shadows. Sometimes they whisper from the trees, and I can hear them. Fucking nope. Obviously Guy is mentally disturbed. Egg him on, ask what they tell him, etc. They tell him that God is a lie, only thing after death is darkness. He says they laugh at him, and leave dead animals at his tree line. Officially creeped out at this point.
He said for a while they visited him at night, and each face carving represented a different spirit that had visited him. Says that they can't stand looking at themselves in death, so they don't step within the tree line, thus why he has the entire thing carved out. I'm pretty silent at this point. I hadn't had goosebumps so bad since I was a kid. And chills just running up my spine. He told me they talked to him from the tree line at night, and try to get him to leave his home. L eagerly try to change the subject. Guy looks down and just keeps talking. He's pale as a sheet, and was obviously genuinely terrified. He even kind of looks like he's welling up. Tells me I'm the only person he's told. Knowing I'm a stranger he apologizes, says he's scared and doesn't know what to do anymore. I try my best to awkwardly console this stranger, and the guy actually kind of starts to break down. I think he needs help, but it's not my place to give it to him. Regrettingly ask him why he's afraid. Says the faces don't work anymore, and 2 weeks ago he had something terrible in his living room. Huh? Greater than he walks over to the tarp sculpture and pulls the tarp off. To reveal the most mangled, terrible thing I have ever seen. It hardly resembled a human being. It was terrifying to have imagined this guy seeing it standing in his living room. Shortly after a loud bang on the wall to my right. I nearly jumped out of my skin. This guy didn't even flinch. Then again, bang, then it just continued on, continuously, like hail hitting a tin roof. Guy screams, stop it, and it ceases. After that I grabbed my shit, tell the guy I'm sorry, and got out of there as quickly as possible. As I'm leaving his home and driveway, I look into the review mirror. The tree line is darker than I've ever seen. Guy calls a week later and apologizes. Says he was silly and everything is okay now. Friend says Guy quit, never hear from him again.
Who doesn't use BitTorrents these days? I'm certainly more than guilty of pirating thousands of dollars worth of media. Mahoney never again. It all started when a torrent file popped up in my client that I didn't remember downloading. It was labeled Mahoney. It was only 112 megabytes. I figured my brother had downloaded a CD or something while I was away from the computer. It didn't worry me too much until my buddy came over and was fucking around on my computer. Hey, what's this Mahoney shit you're torrenting? He said. I don't know why, but I felt like giving a smartass answer. It's, naked pictures of your sister, I said, and he rolled his eyes. I was never very good with wit. Though, as soon as I said that, the computer started making noise. You know the weird feedback that computers make when a cell phone goes off near it? It sort of sounded like that, except somehow angrier. We were a little creeped out, but we just shrugged it off. The Mahoney torrent was about % of the way done, and I was curious to see what it really was, so we put it in the back of our minds and continued bullshitting. Later that night, my brother came home while I was on the computer. I asked him about the Mahoney torrent and he said he didn't download anything. He might have been lying, but I don't know why he would. Not like it mattered. The torrent was 99% finished. I should have deleted it then, but curiosity was killing me when it finally finished. It appeared on my desktop as a single folder, labeled Mahoney. I clicked it open and nearly shit myself. It was my buddy's sister, Kristen, bare-assed and on her knees. All in all, there were about 45 pictures of her naked. I won't lie, I've been curious as to what she looked like in the buff, but she was rather plain-looking, and I was far from crushing on her. Though, there was pictures. In every one, Kristen was crying. Every picture showed Kristen with her eyes puffy and red, makeup running, and mouth open in an unmistakable groan of pain. This realization was too much. I clicked the red X and dragged the file into the trash bin. I was a little shaken, but the folder was gone now. I tried to stop worrying about it and sleep.
The next morning I turned on my computer only to find that the Mahoney folder had been restored to my desktop. I was visibly scared now, but more than that, I was curious. This file had in it exactly what I had said was in it. Maybe it was more than just a file. Maybe it was something magical. I tried to think of something tame, then thought the Mahoney folder has baby pictures in it. After a few seconds, nothing really happened, so I spoke out loud. The Mahoney folder has baby pictures in it. As I was uttering these words, my computer started to make that same strange feedback again, but a little louder than before. Sure enough, when I clicked the folder open, it was filled with pictures of babies. Crying babies. Not just the whiny babies that you always see. They were obviously sobbing. Terrified. Psychologists think babies don't know terror or fear or shit like that, but these babies were horrified by whatever was taking their picture. I was done with this. I dragged the folder to the trash, emptied it immediately, shut the computer off, and left for school. At school, I didn't tell my buddy about the Mahoney folder, and he didn't ask. He was too in shock. Apparently his sister was found unconscious in a pool of her own vomit. I wondered if I should tell him about the pictures, but in the end, I kept it to myself. Hopefully forgetting about it was the best thing to do, but I just couldn't get those images out of my head. Those screaming children, and my friend's sobbing sister. When I got home, I was almost afraid to boot up the computer, but I didn't have to. I walked into my room to find my brother on my computer. "You're into some fucked up shit, man, you know that?" he said as I walked in. I asked what he meant, and he said, "That file you've got, Mahoney or something? There's some fucked up shit in there." When he said that, the feedback was there again, even louder this time. My eyes grew wide, and I ran past my brother to the computer. The Mahoney file was back. I clicked it open with a shaky hand, and the only thing inside was a single text file. I clicked on the file, and saw the two most horrifying words that I have ever read. "I'm free."
When I was younger, like 15-ish, I was home alone, chillin'. There's a knock on the door, so obviously I go see who it is. There's this guy, standing completely still, eyes straight ahead, basically staring at my forehead, with the blandest face possible. No defining features, a face you wouldn't remember even if you had a conversation with him. So I'm standing at the door, asking what he wants, is he looking for someone, etc., and all he replies with is, "Can I come inside? E.g., what do you want? Can I come inside? Who are you? Can I come inside?" in the same deadpan, monotone voice. No real inflection on anything. Eventually I say if he won't talk to me or look at me I'll just call the cops because he's being weird. So if this is a joke to quit it. Can I come inside? So I shut the door, and pretend to call the police. He still just stand there, my door was frosted glass. So I could see, I end up calling the cops for real. Explaining what is going on, get some quick photos for proof, and ask them to come and either chase him off or force him away. They tell me to go and hide somewhere in case he breaks in, so I do. About 15 minutes later I hear the police pull up, so I go and see what's going on. Creepy guy has left, so I give a statement, and show them the photos took. At the time I was freaked out, but dismissed it as a creepy guy. Looking back on it, it's even creepier.
Alrighty. I lived in the house pictured from 1993 to 1998, so from when I was 4 years old to when I was 10 years old. We moved after my 10th birthday. My parents are smart people. They're both professors at our local university and made darn good money, so a beautiful character home such as ours, though I should say theirs, wasn't a big deal to me. I warn you, there is no spooky attic or basement here, so if it's a secret box under lock and key in the forgotten corners of a dusty ghost-ridden area, you are out of luck. But not entirely. If you take a look on the right side of the house, that top two windows of the nice sculpted brick was my room. To the left was my parents' master suite, and suite it was. The basement had been renovated in such a manner that exchange students would stay there while away from their home country. I learned many interesting things about many different cultures, but never will I forget the impression Katya from Penza, Russia. She was quiet. I don't remember what she studied, but she was at our house when I was 9 years old. I distinctly remember saying very little to her until one day when I was playing in the front yard as she was coming home. "Devichka," she said in a soft voice, kneeling next to me, "do you like to live in this house?" It took me a moment to answer because of the thickness of her accent, but I nodded when I understood. She nodded herself and stood, walking around the back and going into her basement apartment for the day.
I don't think I spoke to Katya once more after that, only hearing about her. I was about to sneak downstairs for that one last glass of juice, any reason to stay up when I heard my parents talking in the living room. She says she hears us walking around at unheard of hours and it keeps her up, and she says it's definitely the sound of an adult. What do you think? My dad asked. My mom hummed for a minute before answering. She complained of that smell again to me today, and the strangest thing is I know what she's talking about. She describes the same smell as when we thought we had those septic problems, but we know everything's fine, so I really don't know. My father thumbed through another page of his book. You remember that guest lecturer in the intro to philosophy class I had? The one who said the mind can trick itself into believing into something? Better watch yourself, dear. He smiled devilishly and my mother laughed. At this time I had been noticed and my mother appeased me by getting a glass of juice and tucking me back in bed. I couldn't sleep now, my mind went crazy with what Katya could have been experiencing. The mystery was so great to me, I decided then and there I would stay up all night the next night to see if I could hear or smell anything strange too.
The next night was a Friday and my parents were going out of town for a business conference. They asked if Katya would babysit me for the night and she agreed. We had a lot of fun, we watched movies and ate junk food till it was getting pretty late. Around 11, well past my bedtime, I noticed Katya becoming uncomfortable. She wouldn't sit still, her eyes constantly moved around the room and I could tell she was trying not to alarm me. I asked her what was wrong, she said nothing, instead she suggested we have a slumber party and sleep in my room. I was in, I didn't have any siblings so a cool Russian older sister was awesome. She closed my door and did my hair. She had rolled out some blankets on the floor for her to sleep on and let me ask her all sorts of questions about her home. I learned many things about Russia that night. I won't bore you with the factlets now. Katya was clearly trying to concentrate on anything over whatever was bugging her. Around midnight, something took my attention away from whatever we had been doing. A stench so strong I clenched my eyes shut. It smelled in such a way that I'd never be able to give the stench justice by trying to explain it here. I opened my mouth to protest the stink but Katya practically slammed her hand over my mouth and wrapped her free arm around me so tightly. I was scared my head was going to pop off. She stared intensely at the door, I stared too. Her eyes were narrowed, but frightened. I wanted to ask what was going on, but not only couldn't physically, I'm sure mentally I wouldn't have been able to as well. Then I heard shuffling, soft at first, but as the stench grew clearer and more putrid, the shuffling got louder. Footsteps. Dragging footsteps that sounded like who? Or whatever was walking didn't know how to lift your feet. They sounded wet, like a grown person trudging through thick mud. A low groan accompanied the sound, it was both tortured and angry. A sound that will haunt me for the rest of my days.
The shuffling stopped right outside my door. Whatever was out there was listening to see if we're inside. If we were awake. I saw Katya's cheeks puff, she was holding her breath. Her hand covered my mouth and nose and though I could barely breathe, I knew she was silencing any sound I could make either. We sat that way for what felt like an eternity, and I'm surprised I didn't pee my pants in fear on that night. I barely remember anything after, only Katya finally releasing me from her death grip with a sigh and me falling in and out of sleep through the night. The result of the conference was my parents being transferred to a university in another town. They arranged for another home for Katya before we moved, only a month later, right after my 10th birthday just as I mentioned. I think back to that thing that haunted the hall of our house, how neither me or my parents had complained about it before. When I asked my parents in later years, they admitted several exchange students had mentioned hearing footsteps and smelling that smell, but it was always at insanely early in the morning. The types of times that only a university student pulling an all-nighter are all too familiar with. As for the thing itself and its purpose, well, I know it hadn't intended to creep into our rooms while we slept to kill us. No, it was making sure we were asleep. What it would do if we were not asleep, I never will, and never want to know.
Might as well tell my story. I was about 12 or 13, walking back from shopping center in England with my uncle, around 45 years old at the time, decide to take a shortcut and walk through the woods. It was a nice bright day, so why the fuck not? We get the feeling that we're being watched and can hear brushes moving. I'm telling him something about this video game while he listens. Something in the bush repeats what I'm saying but extremely garbled. I'm scared but don't show it. Start closing my eyes when we walk through bits that have bushes on both sides. It says it again, but much clearer. My uncle looks annoyed and says kids with nothing better to do. We hear it back perfectly. Like it echoed. It repeats 4 or 5 times. We both think it's kids and decide to fuck with them. Uncle, he was kinda the naughty uncle. He'd let me swear around him, which I wasn't supposed to do at my age, says I'm a queer and I like blokes. The thing repeats it perfectly and says it a few times. We think it's hilarious and we're saying all sorts. We start to smell a rusty smell a bit like pennies. Wasn't too odd because the lake nearby had runoff pollutants. Zero sound at all. Birds have stopped, wind stopped, and so have crickets. Something starts to chase us and we get split off from one another. I can hear Uncle shouting my name, so I start walking towards it. He's in a field clearing, looking around for me. Go towards him, glance back because I was always a paranoid boy. See Uncle behind me and non-stop. I'm really hungry. Look forward and see Uncle again looking for me. Look back, see a really stiff version of my uncle without much facial expression. Bolt straight off to the clearing and we both ran home. It fits the type of story that's usually posted here about skinwalkers. I have other uncles with experiences but they refuse to talk about it.
3. A mate I grew up with, Aboriginal bloke. We were camping and I went for a pee on a dark night. We were way inland behind some rock hills, tall dead cane grass was everywhere and couldn't see far. After I relieved myself I heard my mate calling me, but it was away from the camp. It was strange as I'd left him in camp. I waited. He called again, no mistaking his voice. I called back and started walking out toward him. This went on for a little while, changing directions sometimes, tailing me on. Suddenly someone grabs me and I leap out of my skin and spin around. I have already realized I have walked deep into the cane grass and am disorientated. My poor sphincter has taken a bite out of my shorts. It is a very somber face, my mate's face, deadly serious. I'm thrown into confusion. I'm a little angry. What are you doing? You're out in front of me. How did you get behind me? He says, it isn't me. We stand still, it's completely silent. I'm starting to get mad but I can see the fear in his face. I wait. Sure enough, his voice calls again. Now, IMF*RKEN freaked. I'm all wide-eyed and staring at him. He whispers, bad spirit, we'll go back to camp straight away. If I knew where the ***** the camp was I would have run straight up his back to get there. At the camp he tells of how for eons this has happened. People get called away by familiar voices. Sometimes they make it back to tell what happened and sometimes if they are young they perish. I know what I experienced so there is no denying it, but I always console myself with the explanation that it is some type of mimicking bird. If he hadn't heard me and come tracked me down, well.
Be me, working at a reception on a certain company. During the winter it's usually really quiet, just a few customers a day. One day hear a distant voice, can't see anything around me so just forget about it. After some time I hear the voice again, get confused, it's an ambient, ghostly voice, can't make anything out of it. But hear distant calls for help. Ask my coworkers. They hear it sometimes too but don't know what it is or where it comes from. I hear it only near my reception desk but not in the secondary lobby. For example, it's been weeks. The voice gets slightly quieter and quieter, but I can still hear it. Get seriously paranoid because I've been afraid of ghosts since I was a kid. Decide with coworkers that we need to call the police. Police arrives. They mop the fucking agency from top to bottom but can't find anything, yet they hear the voice too. They say they'll come back tomorrow to check if they find anything. One more time, the next day, come to work, can't hear the voice anymore. Police arrive shortly after. I greet them and say that the voices are gone. They check out the nearby area once more just in case, can't find anything. Just as they're about to leave, the officer finds something and is in a visible shock. There's something behind my receptionist table, a dead body. The police ask the staff to leave so they can examine the body. After some time the police ask me to come over. They explain what's going on. The dead man was under 180 centimeters tall and couldn't reach my field of vision from behind the reception table. We share a good laugh and blame the shorty. With an audible laughter we dump the manlet to the nearest trash can. Even today, we still talk about the story of the man who was below 180 centimeters. The laughter, the sheer laughter.
James awoke in a daze. Hello? He murmured. Hello? There was no reply. He was finally waking up, looking around. Where was he? What was this place? All sorts of questions filled his mind. The strong stench of something foul filled the air. A stench he couldn't quite put his finger on. He stood up and looked around, discovering he was in a small, windowless room. The only source of light and sound came from a single humming fluorescent light bulb on the roof. There was a small opening across the room, no bigger than a dog door. James went to look into it, but was caught halfway by a chain tied around his leg, chaining him to the wall. He was trapped like an animal waiting to be killed. Hours passed, and nothing happened. Not a sound. Not another living being, nothing. James was beginning to wonder if he'd be left in here, left to rot. Suddenly something startled him. A tin can slid across the floor from the small opening. He rushed to pick it up. It was labeled, Henry's meat. Whoever was keeping him here, they wanted to keep him alive. He scoffed the can, realizing he hadn't eaten in hours. The meat was cold and tasted foul, but it kept him going. James began to lose track of time. Days passed, as he slowly began to feel himself lose grip on reality. Day after day of waiting for another disgusting can of Henry's meat to arrive through the opening he could never look into. He tried doing exercises. He tried to distract himself from the thoughts of just what might happen to him, but it never worked. Suddenly there was a grunting noise, like a large, whirring factory machine. There was a brief pause, and then gas started to fill the room. James coughed, struggling to breathe. A speaker suddenly came on. "Hello James. We're dreadfully sorry about all this, but we've gotten everything we needed from you right now. You are no longer needed. Please prepare for imminent termination." Was that it? James thought, all this and I'm just no longer needed? Rage engulfed him. He started furiously hitting at the wall till his knuckles bled, but he didn't care. He started throwing old cans of Henry's meat at the wall, screaming. He started to feel lightheaded, and fell to the ground. His vision was beginning to fade to black. With his last glimpse of light he saw the wall across the room open, like a giant door. Two black human-shaped featureless creatures walked out towards him. One approached him on the floor, pointed an object at his head, and in a painless instant consciousness left James. Blake awoke in a daze. He stood up and looked around, discovering he was in a small, windowless room. The only source of light and sound came from a single humming fluorescent light bulb on the roof. There was a small opening across the room, no bigger than a dog door. Hours passed, and nothing happened. Not a sound. Not another living being, nothing. Suddenly something startled him. A tin can slid across the floor from the small opening. He rushed to pick it up. It was labeled, James's meat.
Between age 13 to 15, hanging out with a friend when we noticed that his basement has absolutely no windows, blackest pitch black I've ever seen when you turn off the lights and close the door. We decide to make a game out of it. Sit on the top step with the door shut and the lights off. First person to chicken out and either flip the light switch or open the door loses. We're lasting a while the first time. I'll notice something at the far end of the basement. A pair of red lights next to each other. Fancy they're moving slightly. Point them out to friend. He sees them too. That round ends in a draw as we both yank that door open and jet back upstairs. Rationalize the lights. Probably just some kind of machinery. There was a furnace down there and probably some other stuff that would have red lights. Round 2. Notice the lights straight away this time. Point them out to friend. They are very close to where the furnace is, but not quite in the exact spot. Eyes adjust slightly to the near perfect darkness. Fucking humanoid shape in the dark around the lights. It's like a cloaked person hunched over with glowing red eyes. Again. Looks like it's occasionally shifting from side to side as if uncomfortable sitting in one place for too long. Otherwise doing nothing whatsoever. Well, I lost this round. Back up into the light and the safety. We rationalize some more. This time it's some kind of machine and a pile of clothes or a stain on the wall.
Try for round 3. Again we see the red lights and the gently shifting humanoid shape. It's not making any aggressive moves, so we just stare it down for probably 15 minutes or so. Neither of us are backing down this time, so we agree to a draw, turn on the main lights, and finally go to investigate the eyes. We check the wall where we saw them. Jack shit. There's a single shelf bolted to the wall and holding a single box of paraffin wax and nothing else. Nothing mound-shaped, nothing red, and nothing illuminated. Way too chicken tea to investigate with the lights off. I'd been reading /x/ for several years at this point, and I knew what comes from antagonizing shit you don't understand. We eventually arbitrarily decided that it was the ghost of his dead hamster, whose cage was stored elsewhere in that same basement.
Be me, about 10 years old, live in rural area, neighbors are cow fields. It's about 10 o'clock at night, I'm getting ready for bed. As I'm getting ready I notice there's no bug noises outside. Think that's weird as I live in Louisiana and there's always bugs. Always. Decide to peek out the window, look out the window and there's a man starting right at me. Look into his eyes for what feels like hours, unable to scream or look away. This man wasn't a normal man. His face looked like he had been burned and that it didn't heal right, was just this lumpy stretched out mess. And he was smiling at me. Finally the spell was broken, I screamed. Dad ran outside looking for this man, found no trace. Only feet impressions on the grass.
I used to live on what I'd call a cursed farm, move in a farm with mom and abusive mom's boyfriend. Place has an extensive history of dead people. Last owner died electrocuted when he tried to fix a light on an electric pole outside. Pretty stupid considering electric poles are not private propriété. But whatever, first few months mom seriously injure herself 3 times. All 3 occurrences needing serious medical intervention. Attic is sealed shut, instantly hear footsteps in the attic and other assorted banging noises. Get pushed by an invisible thing while doing farm work in the storage bam. We stay less than a year and sell the place. I wish I could also say that my mom's abusive BF from that time was possessed or some shit. But he was just that much of an asshole. Things kept happening to me, my mom and his kids, but nothing ever happened to him. Maybe he was that fucking evil of a person that the curse thought he was a bro or something. But the real irony in this is that none of the paranormal shit that happened to us in there came close to the kind of violence we had to endure from him, and, as I said, it would'll be easy to pin it on the curse. Expect that we lived in many places before and after that farm, and this guy was about exactly as evil as he always was when he came into our life.
8 years old, riding my bike around in the woods on the edge of town. Gets dark, come back into town on a trail that goes right behind a pizza place, come around the back of the pizza place and see a man lying on the ground on the other side of a chain link fence, perched atop the man is Death, scythe in one hand, tattered dark gray cloak, hood overhead, literally Grim Reaper. Death's hand is on the man's chest. Death turns and looks at me. All I see is the bottom of its chin, bone white under the hood. Instant reaction is pure terror. I scream, immediately switch from terror to anger, and start screaming some more. Get away from him over and over. Someone from the pizza place hears me, comes out the back door, sees what's going on and calls the police. Turns out the guy on the ground was some homeless guy who had passed out, and Death was just another homeless guy who saw a passed out person and was searching through his clothes trying to find money or drugs. The reason I saw bone was because the guy was pale as shit and his side was just a walking stick. Not everything can be spoopy, I guess.
Explain me this. Having a walk in the woods with my dog, find a stray dog identical to mine. She seems quite docile, so. Okay, maybe it has an owner. I'm a volunteer in an animal care center, so I have a microchip checker when I have a walk with my dog. Checker, it's a female, like mine. ID says it's my dog, check mine. Same result, okay? PNG. Do this twice with same results. Decide to pick her to my car, which is a cage big enough for 2 dogs, to leave her in the animal care center. Had to stop in a gas station because low fuel. Go to check the cage, only my dog is there and she's scared AF. Cage was perfectly closed, so I don't understand shit. I don't openly freak out because I was in a public place.
You aren't as clever and funny as you think you are. Obviously they thought it was a great prank until they realized you were armed. Be me, usual weeknight, 1 a.m. in the morning, about to go to sleep. Hear tapping on window. Bro is closest to the window on the couch. He suddenly yells, "There's a crazy person in robes outside, what the fuck?" JPEG. Instincts tell me to grab my 9. Yell at bro to open the side door and see who this fuckhead is. On the staircase, pointing my 9 at the side door. Just as the door opens, chamber around, oh shit. JPEG. I'm about to drop some crazy fuck at my side door. Bro yells, "It's our neighbor Anon." It turned out to be my neighbor in a chicken costume that had a chicken head as the hoodie part. I was so shaken because I honestly thought I may have had to kill some crazy fuck. Why in the fuck my neighbor thought to come over in a chicken suit at 1 a.m. is beyond me. Also scared the neighbor because they heard the gun chamber around.
Not really spoopy but strange. This is a memory I have from when I was around 6 or 7, so not really young nor old. I used to spend time with my dad in the rural area he was from. He was a simple, hard-working country man, used to farm work and a simple lifestyle. Also an alcoholic, but in general a good man. Be me, 6 or 7 years old as I mentioned, hanging out with my dad. He drove his pickup to a relatively isolated piece of land he owned. He would do random chores like cutting up wood, check hunting trails and so on, and would take me with him so I would learn and help him. This time we're just sitting in his truck doing nothing. It's getting dark, so we must go back soon. He's just finishing his 40 and looking off the windshield as the night falls. Look over there, Anon. Look at the firebirds. What? See a bunch of raven-like birds flying around shooting small fire beams out of their beaks like in a synchronized dance. Continue to look at them in awe for a couple of minutes. Dad finishes his beer and drives home. As incredible as it sounds, I thought nothing of it and forgot about it. Months later I asked my dad about the firebirds. He doesn't know what I'm talking about. MFW, he was a troubled man in his youth as well. We'll post a story next.
When I was older, 11 to 12, I started calling my dad crazy old man as part of a game. We were used to jokes, so it didn't seem that disrespectful to me. One day my mom talked to me and asked me to stop calling him that because apparently some old girlfriend of his tried to make him go insane. She didn't give me more details, but here's the story. 30 or so years ago, Dad was sort of a handsome man. Not quite Chad, but he was charming to women, had his fair share of women, or so I've been told. One of them is a crazy bitch though. Apparently she was or knew someone who was into black magic stuff. I'll assume Dad got what he wanted or just got tired of her, so he dumped her ass. Girl got butthurt and threatened him. "You will go crazy for me." Months later Dad got really sick. I'm talking heat strokes, delusions, weakness, etc. His family thought he was going to die. One day he just stands up from his bed, goes to the kitchen and confronts his family members aggressively. Grandpa and uncles try to calm him down. He had one older brother and 3 younger ones, but somehow overpowers them all. They are all freaked out. He gets on my grandma's face, tells her she should fear him. She's a very religious woman. Tells him she can't fear her offspring. Dad throws a heavy-ass sewing machine across the room and storms out of the house. Comes back some days later wearing the same clothes. Doesn't happen again.
Me and brother and are in room on the floor, late at night, and our parents are asleep. We aren't supposed to be awake, so the lights are off. We're just quietly talking to each other and messing around with some Legos or something. We're more or less whispering back and forth non-stop like kids do. Something suddenly crashes downstairs. Probably the cat knocking something over. We both pause. But the whispering doesn't. We look at each other. We are definitely not doing it. Something behind my brother moves. I go to say something and I get a brief view of it as a car passes. What I can only describe as a mummy is lying under my brother's bed, looking at me. It's not a bandage-type mummy. This thing looks like a body that's been left baking in the sun for decades. It has very big teeth. It is reaching for my brother. The whispering is the sound of its skin on the floor. I scream and jump up. Turn on the light. It's there for a split second. Then it's gone. Brother thinks I am crazy. He didn't see it. Never tell him about it. Shove a bunch of boxes and sleeping bags under his bed. Make up some shit about seeing a mouse under there. He doesn't question it. Never saw it again.
True story. Be a freshman in college, super high, walking through your dorm with your friend at 4 a.m. Group of what we wrongfully assume to be students approaches us. Starts conversation. Conversation feels unnatural. They awkwardly shift the discussion towards God. Ask me if I believe in God. My friend says kind of. I say no. They ask me if I've ever heard of the Mother, WTF.png. Tell me they've created a student-run God club and I should join. They tell us it meets at a church in town. We know they're lying because all student groups meet on campus, not off campus. They keep trying to convince us to come. They tell us we should come right then. Keep in mind it's like 4. We get freaked out, lie about having to go meet some people, and we take off. Friend and I duck into my room and rant about how fucking weird that was. We went to a tiny school, less than 2K kids at the time. I've seen basically every at the school at least once. I have never seen those kids before and have not seen them since.
Part 1/3. Been working on an ambulance for a few years. Last 5 months has been in a beach town on the west coast. Most calls are bullshit. Rich old assholes from the cliffs always crashing cars and having heart attacks. Harbor scum and homeless always owing on heroin and whatever else. A lot of death, but all explainable, all expected. We're trained to understand mechanism of injury, only as a way to anticipate injuries not readily visible. Over the last few months I went on a few calls I couldn't understand and saw things I couldn't explain. The first call, dispatched to an unresponsive male at 0622, barely awake from busy full moon night cleaning up degenerates. Partner and I drag ass getting out of the chute. Bodies found in the morning have usually been there for hours equals can't be saved. Pull up and see the morning joggers that called it in on the beach. Fuck. Time to work. Start CPR for appearances because crowd watching. Body is crumpled face down in the sand with clothes ragged and shoes missing. First thing I notice is the skin. Cold, ice cold. Wet, not soaking but wet. Really pale, almost white. First compression comes up soft. CPR 101. Good compressions break ribs. Every rib in this guy's chest was already shattered. Third compression and feel his heart in my palm. I keep pushing out of habit but start looking him up and down. Collarbones and arms fractured too. See his face for the first time since rolling him. What the fuck. JPEG. Every bone in his face is broken. Eyes either gone or too smashed into C. Not a drop of blood anywhere. Whole body shivers when I realize just how dead this guy is. Call it right then and there. Code 914C. Get sheriff's coroners involved.
Let's just say for a while I was kind of obsessed with archiving and I printed a lot of stuff out. I had this idea of compiling all these stories into a physical book. That didn't happen, obviously. Here's a good retelling of one I remember seeing. Worked construction when I was younger, sent out to repave a residential road. It's a really rural area, early morning, not a soul in sight. I'm using my roller, going a good steady slow speed. Sleepy so I'm not really paying attention. Suddenly, this little kid runs out from the tree line. Probably 3 or 4. I don't see him until it's too late. He ran right in front of me and I squashed him. He was so small he basically sank into the thick tar. I went into shock. I stopped the rig and looked around. No one saw it. No one is screaming. Literally no one saw it happen. So I made the dumbest decision in my life. I ran over him until I couldn't see him anymore, and I kept going. Half an hour later, a woman came by absolutely hysteric and asked if we'd seen her son. Nope.x. To this day, that woman has no idea what happened to her son. He's literally right under them. I want to apologize but I can never admit I did it. It's too late now anyway.
17 years ago, little kid in the 5th grade, every day during recess me and my friend, we'll call him Kevin, would hang out during recess. Our favorite spot was a radiator, which was positioned in a far corner of the playground next to a wired fence that separated the school from a trailer park on the other side. We spent the majority of our recesses here. However, by the time we both reached 3rd grade there was a rather large drug bust at the trailer park, causing a lot of the residents to move, leaving it mostly vacant. One trailer remains. Looks rusty. Over time more and more vacancy notices are posted by the city on the door but nobody ever receives them. Guess everyone just stopped giving a shit about it after a while. One day me and my friend are eating lunch outside during recess. We're both facing the fence and the abandoned trailer park. Out of fucking nowhere we see a white flash from beyond the fence. Almost didn't notice it with the sun being out, but it was still noticeable. At first we think nothing of it, and don't tell anyone about it. However, over the next few weeks it started happening more and more frequently, until we would see it pretty much every day during recess. Decide to tell one of the staff helpers about it and she immediately calls the police. Didn't hear anything else about it after that. Walking home with my friend from a birthday party months down the line, we split off as we both lived on different streets. Say goodbye and tell him to log on to RuneScape when he gets home. Yeah, it was when RuneScape was pretty new. Sue me, sitting on my computer mindlessly hours later. Notice he never got on. Didn't show up to school the next day either. Odd. Days pass, still haven't seen him. Word starts to spread that he's sick. Ask my parents if I can go visit him since he's sick one day. They both exchange worried glances. Later my dad tells me that he's visiting his grandparents in Chicago. I'll can't. Probably one more post.
Sitting at lunch alone on top of the radiator again. It's been literally months since I've last seen Kevin. Getting pretty lonely. See that fucking flash again from beyond the fence and get mad. Run up to the staff helper and tell her that the trailer is flashing at me again. She tries to tell me that she already took care of it and it's just my imagination. Fuck that shit. Tell my parents about it that night. One of my dad's friends worked in the local police department. Very next day recess has to be held in the inside gym. Teachers won't tell us why. Next day the trailer is gone and the area surrounding it is surrounded with yellow tape. The fence is later redone and is boarded up instead of being chain linked. Somehow get the feeling I'll never see my friend again at this point. Years pass and I forget about it until recently when I went back home to visit my parents and we drove past my old elementary school. Trailer park is gone and a daycare sits there instead. While driving, asked my mom what really happened to Kevin. Apparently my dad's police department friend and his coworker investigated that trailer park again. And inside of the trailer that found a stash of pictures, about 20 in total, of me and my friend sitting on that fucking radiator during recess. A couple of me sitting by myself after Kevin had gone missing. It really bugged me that they had lied to me all these years. But his body was never found, so I guess there's that. Whenever I think about how close I came to being in his shoes I shudder. I don't think till ever know if he's dead or alive or if they found who did it. By far my most disturbing childhood experience.
Canker. When I awoke, my first thought was that I should have brushed my teeth the night before. My mouth was sticky with tar and the filth of sleep. I opened and closed my jaw regretfully, smacking my tongue as I did so. That was when I noticed the bump that had formed on the roof of my mouth. I chalked it up to poor dental hygiene and tried to put it from my mind, but, as is so often the case when we try to ignore something, the bump kept interposing itself on my thoughts. My tongue would touch the welt of its own accord, morbid fascination overpowering self-control. By nightfall, it had neither reduced in size nor become any easier to ignore, so I took a closer look. Shining a flashlight at a mirror, I was able to put a face to the annoyance. It was, as I'd surmised, little more than a red bump on the roof of my mouth. It was smaller than it felt and reminded me of nothing so much as a zit. The idea repulsed me, but lacking a better explanation, this is what I regarded it as. The damned thing kept me up at night and distracted me during the day, while seeming to grow ever larger. It took on a whitish hue and seemed to be filling with some fluid mucus perhaps, though I could think of it only as pus. After the third day, I'd had enough. Reaching my fingers into my mouth, I felt around for the bump. It was slimy and seemed to slide from my probing, but I eventually seized it between two nails and squeezed until the membrane burst. There was an awful foulness in my mouth, like decay, and I spat and rinsed it away as best I could. A portion of the blister's contents had stuck to my forefinger and I saw it was a cloudy, murky white stained by an off-yellow hue. More a gel than a liquid, I wiped it off in disgust at what had been pooling in my mouth.
Less than a month later, it returned. The same spot had swollen up during the night and it looked whiter than ever, with bare redness at its inflamed edges. There was no pain, just a curious numbness, and I disposed of it as I had the first. Still unable to get past the zit comparison. I wondered if maybe I wasn't doing myself some harm by not allowing it to heal on its own. When it returned in a couple weeks, I resolved to just let it be. I scrubbed my mouth day and night, but the canker grew. My tongue touched it in horrified disgust, but still I restrained myself. When it had nearly tripled its original size, my resolve crumbled. I got the flashlight once more and yawned wide into the mirror. I found the bump had become a hemisphere nearly an inch long. It was pasty white except for where veins throbbed across it. The membrane was taut with the ooze within, and at its center, there was a black dot. As I lowered the flashlight, the mirror showed me that the dot grew larger as the light receded, and I had to choke back the bile that rose to my lips. I took the sharpest knife I had and stabbed the eye growing in my mouth, feeling only numbness as it, staring silently at me, burst. Catharsis. In a darkened room, deep in the latest reaches of night, a man slept. Rain danced a sad pitter-patter against the single window of the room, and the sounds of urgent winds and distant trains filtered through the windows in perfect seal. The man turned in his sleep. And, as the man slept, he dreamed. And through his dreams, a man named Michael died. Michael's arms burned and his fingers cracked, white knuckles and bleeding palms proving to be a poor distraction from the abyss that gaped beneath him. A spasm threatened to shake his grip free, but Michael restrained it with a pained grunt. Michael could feel the blood oozing from his hands, could sense the strength seeping from his overtaxed muscles. But he did not care. Any second he kept holding on was a second he was still alive. Time seemed to slow down, paralytic agony crawling in spiderwebs through his back, his shoulders, and into his arms. Muscles tore and he seemed to grow heavier by the moment. Michael let out a gasp and his fingers buckled. In an instant he was weightless, wind tearing past him as the walls of the shaft flew upward. Faster than he could believe, Michael felt the flesh of his back being torn apart. The spike formed an ugly, jagged cone, arresting the momentum of the plummet as 3 feet of bloody metal burst through his chest and gut. A spasm shook Michael's body as his spine caught and tore against the spike, and he died.
At first, Michael did not know where he was. The compartment was tight as a coffin. Its walls black and grating. Dawning horror drew the breath from his lungs as he saw the small jets of either side of him grow orange with anticipation. He screamed. The jets erupted, pouring liquid fire into the cremator, glistening Michael's skin, causing pus and blood to ooze from every inch of his body. The red fire became white, and the weeping flesh blackened and caught fire, seeping the inferno into his organs and bones. Michael felt his eyes burst from the heat. Then, he died. He was strapped to a table. Above him, a man lowered the screaming metal teeth of a chainsaw onto Michael's neck. The buzz slowed for only an instant before pulling flesh and blood from its prey, hurling them into the air. Through the agony, Michael felt his arteries torn, his windpipe severed, his esophagus eviscerated. The sudden inability to breath throttled him as the grinding blade touched bone, protesting with a halting hiss. Then, the blade was clear, the nerve severed, and Michael decapitated. He imagined he could feel his head roll off the table as he died. Suffocation, bleeding, poison, disease, starvation, crushing, Michael died again and again, without rest or mercy or hope. And rain splashed gently on a darkened window as a man slept blissfully.
Lucid systematic dreaming. I can hold sleep at bay for only so long before it seduces me again and I find myself falling, awaking to a new dictate, some cryptic mantra that governs the impossible physics of the place and unfamiliar, frightening locations. The sky is monochromatic, though its singular hue seems to change when I do not notice it, often blue, sometimes green, occasionally black, though never red before. The sky is red. This is new. The river asserts itself next, drawing the eye even from the banks that hold it. It reflects the scarlet sky, but currents run through it, deepening the playful innocence to a velvety crimson, rich and dark and overflowing with the promise of secrets untold and pleasures unguessed. The onslaught of color recedes and allows me a blissful moment to orient myself, though only just a moment. The land is vast, trackless, and unblemished. It is so verdant that it is barren and so endless that it is confining. I find it difficult to breathe and have to drop to my knees as a shock of vertigo overtakes me. It feels as though the sky opens up and the ground falls away and I will surely plummet into the gaping maw of the red void. The feeling passes. So too, do my surroundings. The open field has given way to the neon graffiti of some toy maker's demented fantasy. Blocks, dolls, and geometric shapes prowl around me like carnivores. I keep my gaze cast downward to avoid staring at the blinding light of the moon and its twisted, cavernous abyss of a grin.
The magnitude of my shift does not disturb me quite so much as the change of scale. I don't remember a drink me bottle, but the toys tower over me, their frozen, plastic smiles full of large, white teeth. Why do toys need teeth? I wonder morbidly, ever present of the looming, growing shapes that array themselves around me so helpfully, so lovingly, so viciously. The music begins and its disjointed melody recalls childhood fears and prayers in equal turn. Bestial circus shows crowd my mind as ice cream trucks slowly putter down uplifting streets and just two distant avenues. When, at last, I return from far away, I notice that the music, that chimerical amalgam of rattling bells and wheezing organs, has already passed, though I cannot say for how long. The darkness hurts my eyes as much as the sensory overload, and I stumble to a light post to align myself in the frightening stillness that penetrates my mind. The streets and alleys of my youth lie splayed out before me, though the palpable night makes them strange, untried, and overawing. Faceless shadows wander this urban wasteland, some bare stone walls, some the flickering stained yellow light that baits mindless moths, and yet others wear the trappings of men. Clothed and fitted to precision, and yet their discomfort is plain. The suits of human creatures, skin and bone and all, are nearly flawless, lacking only eyes to give identity to the soul trapped within. They have mouths, however, and I can see their large, white teeth before any opens their mouth.
I move away from them, but a sound draws my steps short. It is a disturbing wetness, impossible to describe except through metaphor or onomatopoeia. It is as if someone below me was pacing through a sewer, the moist thwomp of their footfalls matching my arrested pace. I begin again and it is louder and closer. It is so horrible that my mind lingers on thoughts of fish vast, open, lipless mouths gaping and sucking at me with ravenous, unending thirst. I run. The sound grows. When I halt again, the footfalls fail to follow suit. They persist and are getting nearer. Nothing behind me. Both sides are clear. A movement up ahead. A person? I turn and another. No, the same person is at my back. Have I found an antagonist in all this? No, that would be too simple, and indeed, he is already gone, his hat and coat stealing away his identity from me. The sound is upon me and I cannot bear to turn around a third time. I will not give it form and, from there, function. I jerk myself from the encounter and my body feels like it's fallen from a great distance. My heart will not stop its damnably arrhythmic pounding and I silently scream for the 6th night in a row.
Malediction of sapience. Mankind has long contented itself with the harsh realities of a hostile and imperfect world, believing each in their own way that paradise would come to them. Some men worked for the promise of a better tomorrow. Some put their hopes in religion, and yet others actively worked to shape the world into their own version of perfection. But these men have been blind to one, very unsettling realization. A realization that came upon a man named Jeffrey Germain one night. The revelation, which we will discuss shortly, did not come out of thin air, as many people believe epiphanies derive from. Rather, it had slowly been taking shape in Jeff's mind over the many years. It was not until during an impassioned theological debate with friends he vocalized the concept, and its enormity fell on him like a gut-churning sickness. Conversation stopped and the men in the room stared blankly at Jeffrey, as if simultaneously daring him to repeat himself and wishing intensely that he would not. Jeffrey politely excused himself from the room, and spent the next 2 months in seclusion. At the end of this period, he had written a manuscript based around his idea. It would be comforting to say that this document has since been destroyed, but I fear that I can make no such claim with any assurance of veracity. In the meantime, Jeff began showing his book to his peers, trying to generate critical responses. But, no matter who he tried, the results were always the same. His reader looked on his idea with skepticism, then doubt, then rage, then fear, and finally, grim acceptance. They left, older and sadder than they had been.
Jeffrey Germain took notice of this trend and grew quite suspicious of his idea. At first, he had believed the idea to be his own, the product of his rational inquiry into the nature of humanity. But now, more and more, Jeff felt alienated from his revelation. By degrees, he found himself fidgeting nervously and casting sidelong glances at the thinly bound manuscript. What Jeffrey feared, but would not consciously admit, was that it seemed as if the epiphany had discovered him, rather than vice versa. An irrational and paranoid fear, to be certain, but one that would not leave his mind. And when, after word of his theory leaked to the media and they pronounced it the death of modern philosophy, Jeffrey Germain walked off the end of a very long pier one night, and never surfaced again. The late Jeffrey Germain's revelation, which I will not elaborate upon with the same grotesque detail that he put forth, was not a terrible dictum that disproved the existence of God or cast doubt on the essential unity of the universe. In a certain light, it almost seems reassuring. Beneficent. It is reflection and doubt that make it disturbing and frightening. The scope of our senseless legacy of war is drawn into all the sharper relief. Jeffrey Germain's realization, devoid of thoughts, proofs, and justifications that thrilled and horrified, was just this: no man dies without a purpose. Death is so much more than the end of a single life. It is the very fuel upon which all things are built. We are not cogs in the juggernaut of history, we are the grease between its gears.